Welcome to Two Trick Pony, a twice-monthly podcast where we explore all the ways that people have found and cultivated their second tricks, from the culinary arts to competitive ballroom dancing and everything in between. We're your hosts. I'm Melissa Betters.
And I'm Claire Ma, and we thank you for joining us. Each week, we invite guests onto the show who have broken away from the expectations of their training, education, or CV to find fulfilling hobbies or even entirely new careers.
We take a look at how cultivating a multifaceted self can lead you to community, connection, and confidence.
This week, we're joined by Masid Cader, an investment banker, fine dining enthusiast, and dad to a toddler. He's joining the show from his home in New York City, and we're in for a different take on how one might pursue a passionate hobby. We'll hear from Masid as he recounts his experience becoming professionally trained in the culinary arts, which included a stint in the intense, no-nonsense kitchen of a 2-star Michelin restaurant.
Mind you, this is his hobby, all while working full-time in finance.
I've been lucky enough to partake in a Masid-made meal, an amazing rendang curry, I still remember. Before we turn to our interview, we want to introduce you to a brief history of the culinary arts in the United States.
We all need to eat, but some have taken food to a whole new level. For something so crucial to survival, there sure are a lot of terms. Gastronomy is the practice or art of choosing, cooking, and eating good food. This can include studying food culture and how it fits into society. The culinary arts, on the other hand, is its hands-on application, learning how to make and plate the meals that fine dining enthusiasts admire.
The American culinary arts tradition has its roots in 1800s Europe. Haute cuisine, or high cuisine, was introduced by Marie-Antoine Carême, who emphasized French cooking as a skilled and careful art form, in contrast to the medieval style of huge multi-course meals showcasing abundance. To master this kind of cooking, people needed to be educated, and so began the culinary school system to train chefs to deliver uncompromising quality and precision in food. Specialization also emerged. Georges-Auguste Escoffier designed the Brigade de Cuisine, a kitchen hierarchy system that borrowed from military organization and assigned every person in a kitchen to a clearly defined role. Carême and Escoffier also shaped plating techniques, since how food looks can be almost as important as what we're eating.
Standing out in the restaurant world is serious business. The 2007 Pixar film Ratatouille, about a humble rat in Paris with a passion for food, introduced a whole generation to the inspiring but punishing world of gourmet kitchens.
For chefs with award ambitions, the names Michelin and James Beard can launch a career into stardom. On the international stage, the name Michelin is synonymous with fine dining. It's also the name of the tire company, with its puffy mascot that looks more like a creature from Ghostbusters than a tire or a chef. In 1889, brothers André and Edouard Michelin founded their tire company in Clermont-Ferrand, a small town in France. To drum up business for their tires, they created the first Michelin Guide in 1900 to encourage people to drive their newfangled automobiles and see the sights in France. As interest grew, the guide was expanded to include more countries and elevated to include secret diner restaurant reviews. Its star system was born in 1926. A single star signified a fine dining establishment. Later, the system was expanded to 3 stars, but gaining even a single star is a huge honor.
It's also important to realize that the system isn't comprehensive. There's no way that Michelin can rank every single restaurant, or even just the great ones. Instead, anonymous inspectors from the hospitality industry visit a select number of restaurants in specific locations, several times a year, and then rate their experiences.
The system came to the U.S. in 2005, first in New York City. Thomas Keller is the most decorated chef in America, currently holding 7 Michelin stars for his restaurants, one of which is in New York. We'll hear Keller's name again in today's interview, as he is a source of inspiration.
Today, Michelin reviews restaurants in only a handful of cities in the U.S.
Well, Michelin isn't the only word, especially on American gastronomical goodness. The James Beard Foundation, which selects chefs and restaurants for its annual James Beard Awards, was established in 1986 to celebrate the best in gastronomy in the United States. In the intervening years, the organization has focused more on issues in food systems, including sustainability and treatment of the people who work in the industry. As for the man himself, James Beard, too, was a two-trick pony. He was expelled from college and worked in a traveling theater group before trying his hand at catering, opening a food shop in the late 1930s, and writing books and teaching classes on how to make food with local, homegrown ingredients. He's credited as a leader in creating a national identity for American culinary traditions.
Given all that, how is the professional culinary arts a hobby? On our show, we're interested in a wide range of experiences and relationships with second tricks. We've been inspired by people who pursue joy or balance, carving out spaces for calm and reflection. What's remarkable about today's conversation is the extent to which Masid was motivated to work 7 days a week between his full-time job and the high-stress environment of professional culinary training, with no expectations to change careers or monetize his newfound expertise.
It's one thing to enjoy fine dining, and another one entirely to create it. We wanted to understand the why and the how, and maybe even when we can get a dinner invitation.
And with that, let's turn to our conversation with our guest today, Masid Cader, who's calling in from New York City.
So thank you so much, Masid Cader, for agreeing to come onto Two Trick Pony. To start us off, can you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do for work, and what hobby we're going to be talking about today?
Hi, Claire and Melissa. It's a pleasure to join. I'm very excited to be part of this. Thank you for having me. I'd like to talk to you today about my passion for cooking, which is a hobby that I have taken way too seriously, all while working full-time as an investment banker in New York City.
Can you tell us a little bit about your first encounter with cooking and how you got into that?
Surprisingly, I didn't really start cooking until probably 10 years ago. And I'm not taking into account, by the way, heating up a hot pocket or two in my college dorm room or making instant ramen noodles late at night. Just for background, I was born and raised in Sri Lanka. I know people say this a lot, but my grandmother is truly the best cook I know. I grew up around her food, but for whatever reason, I never actively got involved helping out in the kitchen. I think I first started playing around with cooking once I got engaged, then moved into a nicer apartment in New York City with a kitchen that was clean and safe to use, relative to the one I'd shared with my college buddy when we first moved into the city. But my true aha moment, just looking back, was probably eating at 11 Madison Park in 2015. I was blown away by not just the flavor of the cuisine, but the service and the plating, which was simple and beautiful at the same time. And I just told myself, I want to be able to do that one day. So I began messing around, but given time commitments to my Monday through Friday job, I wasn't improving nearly as fast enough, which was very frustrating to me. I then casually started looking around for courses I could take, and I came across a diploma program that I could just take on weekends. Out of curiosity, I went to an info session with my wife, never thinking I would actually enroll, given how intense it sounded. But at the end of the day, my mind was made up that I would do it. It turned out to be great timing, just from my perspective, because a couple months later, after I was done with formal training, the pandemic hit. We were stuck at home, which, at least for me, meant that I had a lot more time to practice my skills.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the cooking school? Which school did you attend? And did they have a particular philosophy about how they would teach cooking? And what did you get out of it?
The school I attended was called the Institute of Culinary Education. It was known as ICE for short, which is in downtown Manhattan. If I'm remembering correctly, the program itself was 8 to 9 months, but following all of the coursework, you had to do 200 plus hours in a restaurant kitchen setting. So I was there effectively every Saturday and Sunday for close to 12 hours each, which was a great learning experience but exhausting at the same time. And this was not a class you typically think of in terms of recreational classes where you're cooking and drinking wine and sharing a few laughs. It was far from that. There were a lot of laughs along the way, but it was intense. The chef instructors there want to make sure you can deal with all aspects of working in a professional New York kitchen, and they push you very, very hard. And at the end of each class, just doing the dishes and the kitchen cleanup would take close to an hour in itself. I thought the course structure was well organized. It progressed nicely from basic cooking and knife skills to cooking techniques, regional cuisines. There was a module on baking, and it ends with what they call advanced culinary techniques. And the final requirement for graduation was the internship at a restaurant kitchen. I ended up at a 2 Michelin-starred kitchen at the time, and I have never been in a more pressure cooker setting in my life. Every Sunday was so exhausting that my wife, God bless her, used to give me a 1-hour full body massage just to get me fresh for the work week that started on Monday. So looking back, I was effectively a partially broken man who was working 7 days a week for several months straight, but it was awesome.
I do want to hear more about your experience working in the 2 Michelin-star restaurant, but before we get there, I want to understand a little bit more about your motivation for going this hardcore into culinary training. Did you go into this thinking that you wanted to work professionally in a kitchen?
Honestly, that was not how I was leaning when I signed up. While I was doing it, that pretty much confirmed my view. And maybe it was a midlife crisis, but I truly did look at it as purely a passion project. It was a big investment of time, but unlike a lot of other types of higher education, cooking is a skill that I viewed as something I can actively practice as much as I wanted to and probably get better at over time. Don't get me wrong, I would love to own a restaurant. I think most of us at some point have had the thought of wanting to own a restaurant, but the restaurant life is very tough, and I have a lot of respect for those that do it. It just, I knew, wasn't really for me.
Once you completed this course that you took at this culinary school, how did you keep up your skill level, or how did you continue to improve your skill level? You obviously worked in the kitchen, but were there any other resources that you found to be helpful, or cookbooks that you found particularly useful or inspiring, or anything like that?
I enjoy collecting cookbooks, but a lot of those fine dining type cookbooks are not practical for use in everyday cooking unless you spend a couple of days on it just to make one recipe. But the one book that I have read a couple of times cover to cover and used very often for reference is called The Food Lab by Kenji López-Alt. He has worked in restaurant kitchens, but I believe he also has a food science background, so he very clearly and in a very funny way explains the science behind cooking. If you have time, you should definitely check it out. And the second resource that I still use to this day is Chef Thomas Keller's series on Masterclass, which is a streaming series that you can subscribe to. For those of you who are not familiar with Chef Keller, he is the most famous and the most awarded American chef. He is my idol, and he's truly, in my mind, the GOAT of American cooking. And the way he explains things and his style of working and cooking is something that truly inspires me. The pandemic definitely turbocharged my learning experience, though. Given we were stuck at home, I was able to practice pretty much constantly. And I took advantage of suppliers doing home delivery of premium ingredients because there was less demand from their usual restaurant customers. So that was pretty cool. It was lonely at times just being stuck at home, but I guess there's a positive to everything, and this was that positive that I took from the experience.
I definitely remember that moment because I ordered, I think, 80 oysters from the Chesapeake Bay oyster delivery. And right, oysters are something that most people don't buy at home, don't buy for home. So they shipped to me like 2-day overnight in ice. That was challenging to finish eating them. But
it took a lot of time to shuck all of those oysters. That was an early project of ours.
I wanted to follow up. Well, now there are three of you. And how do you balance parenting with your cooking hobby?
There is a lot less peace and quiet when cooking, that's for sure. But it's been different and it's been a lot of fun. My son is 3 now and he loves to get involved in the kitchen. He loves making eggs with me in the morning and it is awesome and very fulfilling. He also likes to occasionally tell me what style he likes his eggs. He has a lot of preferences, whether it's an omelet or scrambled or just fried. And we try our best to introduce him to as many foods as possible. And being able to cook with him definitely helps me do that. I remember when we were first introduced him to solids, we followed a plan where we gave him 100 different foods in the first 6 weeks. So my wife and I were cooking for him pretty much nonstop when he started first eating solids. He's a pretty good eater at the moment, but fingers crossed that whole introduction pays off in the long run.
Well, hopefully at some point he will get old enough to then appreciate how amazing you are at cooking, right? He's in an age right now where he can't quite appreciate it, but he'll get there.
I hope so, and I hope I get to cook with him for many years to come.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about your style of your cooking. You know, you come from a background of what I think is one of the best culinary traditions in the world. We were recently in Sri Lanka, and I can staunchly say that it is one of my favorite cuisines that I've ever had. So I wanted to ask you, how would you characterize your style of cooking, and what went into building that?
Obviously, I fully agree with you. Unbiased opinion, it has some of the best and most diverse food in the world, and it hasn't really found its footing in the US like it has over in Europe and the UK especially. I don't make a ton of Sri Lankan food. I leave it to the experts, mostly because a traditional Sri Lankan meal just has too many different components to be able to cook at home consistently enough, and it's usually a multi-day affair. But given my Sri Lankan background, I do like whatever I cook to be extremely spicy. So I tend to throw a few more chili flakes than what's called for in a standard recipe. Aside from that, Sri Lankan food is also very visually appealing and has a lot of textural contrast to the meal. So I try to get some inspiration from that as well when I think through how to plate and how to build a dish.
Do you have any kind of particular style of your plating or any particular sources of inspiration where you come up with ideas for how to plate your food?
I mentioned this earlier, but my first true fancy fine dining experience in New York was at 11 Madison Park, which is a 3 Michelin-star restaurant in the city. We actually, funny story, got engaged shortly before the dinner. So maybe I was just relieved that I had just asked the question, but it was one of the best meals of my life. I still remember how beautiful and well presented all of the dishes were, and there were multiple courses. And if I needed to pick one inspiration, it would be the chef there. His name is Daniel Humm. His techniques are pretty complex, but all of the plates are presented so simply, have nice colors, everything is cut perfectly. The meat was cooked exactly right, and the consistency of the sauces was excellent on the plate.
I definitely have heard about this engagement at 11 Madison Park. It is legendary among the people that your wife knows. I want to ask you another question. So as you know, our show is called Two Trick Pony. So we might consider you a two-trick pony, where your first trick is your skill in financial analysis and the fact that you're an investment banker at one of the most happening places in the world. But your second is your passion for cooking and plating, right? Making your food look beautiful. What would you say is the connection between these two things?
There are a couple of similarities, but no matter how intense finance is, it's a lot scarier, trust me, when you are being yelled at by a chef in a hot, high-intensity kitchen. And keeping up that level of intensity and attention to detail for the entire day is very similar between both my jobs. Working in a Michelin-starred kitchen, you don't put anything on the plate unless it's absolutely perfect. And in my day-to-day job, I have definitely taken this to heart. When we put pitch books together, for example, my team will tell you that I'm very particular about things like formatting and making sure everything looks beautiful, in addition to the content being on point as well. Teamwork is one of the other similarities. And for me especially, it was an eye-opening experience being the most junior person in the kitchen on the weekends and then being somewhat senior at my day job, Monday through Friday. I almost had to learn to be a strong junior team player from scratch, which helped me become a better leader at work.
Is there any moment where you felt especially proud or excited about what you were doing or what you were accomplishing?
The proudest moment for me was when I was officially done with the course, which meant that I had completed all of my hours in the kitchen. The school used to give us a timesheet that needed to be signed off by the chef on any given day. And I remember the relief that I felt when I had to get that sign off for the final time. It was a Sunday, and just looking forward to the Monday where I could sit at my desk and then think ahead to that next weekend where I was going to have my first day off in several months was just a very cool and proud experience for me, just looking back. Keep in mind, I also did this in my 30s. I think it would have been a lot easier if I was doing it from a much younger age, where both my mind and my body were conditioned to handle the environment, but it was definitely a shock to my system. And one very vivid memory I have looking back is my experience cleaning the fridge where all the fish and the meat was stored. And as the most junior person in the kitchen, I had to do this every Sunday after we had lunch service. It involved essentially stepping into what you could think of being a very cold icebox for a couple of hours, moving out all the fish, cleaning the shelves with soap and water, and then putting everything back in its place. The first time I was asked to do this, I was so cold. I stayed for 5 minutes. I ran into my locker to grab a sweatshirt. And then on my way back, I remember one of the senior chefs saw me and basically asked me what I was doing, called me soft, made fun of me. I took it off immediately and struggled through that first day. The next few weeks, it became gradually easier, but the experience definitely helped push me into, it was more of a mental thing than a physical thing. And that's some of the lessons I also learned from my experience working in the kitchen as well.
No, I think that's a really great point, right? I think that it's hard to understand how much work goes into something that is focused on hiding a lot of that work, right? For like people who go out and experience fine dining, you're not supposed to see the labor that goes on behind it. And, for people who may dream about leaving their desk job, there's maybe a bit of a rude awakening sometimes about just how difficult it is to work on your feet all the time. So I think that's a really great point that you bring up.
I met some great people along the way, both in school as well as in the kitchen, that gave me a newfound appreciation for just how much blood and sweat and tears people put into their work in the food and in the restaurant industry in general. And I just feel it's so underappreciated. Just working side by side with people from completely different walks of life, completely different backgrounds than me, some of whom I'm still in touch with to this day and I would consider lifelong friends, just gave me a whole new perspective on how to treat people with respect and with dignity. And I do think it made me a better person, and I like to think it will make me a better person going forward.
Why do you think it's important for people to potentially pursue secondary interests or passions like you with cooking? What do you think people can get out of doing these types of experiences?
If you have the time or the resources, it's definitely something I would strongly recommend. In addition to the connections that you make along the way, it also puts you in positions and even situations that you would have never been exposed to before. I personally love learning new things. I love developing new skills. And I am getting older, but I guess it's never too old to learn something new. And in my case, it forced me to get off the couch, even for a few hours. My wife, likes to remind me that I'm addicted to watching sports on TV. I've been guilty, if I'm being honest with myself, of investing way too much time watching Sri Lanka playing cricket or watching Formula One. but it definitely helps to switch up your routine every once in a while. And I'll probably never regret the time and the effort and even the money I put into cooking, because it's a skill that I can hopefully practice and improve for many years to come.
Yeah, no, one of the things we talk about just in general with this podcast is how, right, pursuing these types of hobbies and activities not only brings you confidence, but it can also open up community. It connects you to people that, as you said, you may not have ever met before. You likely would not have met before or in any other way. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
So before we let you go, we're going to close out our interview with a couple of rapid fire questions. So these are questions that are meant to be rapid fire, right? So we're going to ask you to just give very short answers, sometimes 1 or 2 words. But any questions?
Nope, fire away.
All right, so first question. What is your favorite meal to cook for people?
Pasta.
For someone who has never had Sri Lankan food before, what is one thing that they would have to try?
Hot buttered cuttlefish.
That's a good choice. We enjoyed that very much when we were there.
Best restaurant in New York City?
La Tuzi.
What would be the ultimate gift to buy somebody who's into cooking?
A Le Creuset Dutch oven. That's 4.5 quarts.
Can you share a fun fact about plating?
Don't put things in even numbers unless it's 2. So you always put either 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 of something versus 2, 4, 6. It looks more pleasing on the eye.
I finally understand why when you bring a group to a restaurant with 4 of you, that they bring you 3 pieces of bread.
What is the next thing that you'd like to learn or master?
AI.
If you were to die tomorrow, what would be your last meal?
My last meal would be Kung Pao chicken. I've had Kung Pao chicken probably every weekend, sometimes multiple times a weekend for the last, 10 years probably. So if I could have a last meal with a side, it would be a main of Kung Pao chicken and a side of Kung Pao chicken.
And finally, do you have any last words of wisdom that you would like to share?
Be careful when deep frying.
That's a pretty good one.
Very last question. Is there somewhere that people can find you or your work that you'd like to share?
I'm not super active, but I do have a food Instagram account. It's my first and last name, so Masid Cader.
So thank you again so much, Masid, for coming on to Two Trick Pony. I've always been fascinated by your very intense foray into the world of cooking and plating and just fine dining. And so I'm really glad that we were able to hear a little bit more about that experience.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been fun.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this week. We will be taking a break for the holidays, and we will be back with our next episode in the new year.
If you want to get in touch with us, or if you know a Two Trick Pony who would be a great fit for the show, please let us know by email at twotrickponypodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at Two Trick Pony Podcast. Those are both with the number 2.
And if you liked this podcast, please rate us and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.